Hi, this is Neil Clements, and this is The Real Deal with Neil. Today we're going to be talking about how do we review properties for the purpose of land subdivision. We're going to go through everything from frontage to access to deed restrictions, and we're going to be talking about everything from exempt to minor, and we might touch on major subdivides as well. And so let's get to it. So there's a lot that we have to do when reviewing properties for Subdivide. And primary focus of this video, like I said, is going to be exempt subdivisions and minor subdivisions. And so we're going to be talking about how do we get into these properties with kind of the minimum amount possible, but also for the maximum amount of reward. And so the thing we need to start with is actually road frontage. And so road frontage is what makes a subdivide possible in the first place. And so you either have current road frontage, or some areas will let you, create a private drive, or will let you run a kind of an inexpensive road, down like a side of a property and kind of do like a big flag essentially almost. But today we're really going to be going over existing roads. And so what are we looking for as far as road frontage? Well, the answer is going to depend. And it's going to depend on your county and your city regulations. For instance, in the areas that I work in, we can have regulations that go all the way down from 75 feet of road frontage, and this is going to be the width of the front of the property at the road, all the way up to 400 feet minimum. And this could be for an acre, this could be for 5 acres, 10 acres, it all varies. And so a lot of the counties and areas that I work and cities are, 150 feet for kind of these rural subdivisions. That's a baseline to kind of start with. Now there are some counties that we work in that, depending on how much traffic the road has, the amount of road frontage goes up. So for instance, if it's a really low trafficked, county road or private road, maybe it's only 75 feet. If it's a farm to market, maybe it's 100 to 125. And then, as you get bigger, if it's a bigger road, 4-lane or a 6-lane road, then you have to have 150. Then if it's a highway, you have to have maybe 300 or more. So, and then also sometimes goes by acreage sizes. So that one goes by, how many people are coming down the road. There are other counties that we work in that go by acreage size. So some of them say that if you have an acre or less, like a half acre, then you can potentially do like 50 feet of frontage. But if you have more than 2 acres, you have to have 300 feet of frontage, then you have to have 600 feet of frontage for like 10 acres. And so every county has a road frontage guideline. And that's really where I start, because if you don't have the road frontage, then you're not going to be able to do the subdivide, and the deal is instantly dead. Because the subdivides that we're trying to do here, we're not talking about installing roads, we're talking about roads that are already there. So if the road's not already there, it doesn't have really good road frontage, then the deal's dead in the first place. So that's how you review road frontage. And then where are you going to figure out what the road frontage requirement is? Well, as with a lot of things that we're going to be talking about today, you're going to look at the counties or the cities or whatever municipality has approving authority for the property that you have. You're going to look at their subdivision guidelines. You're going to look at their zoning regulations. You're going to look at the published documents that they have put out there to tell the world, in this county, this is what it requires. There's other interesting counties that we've worked in, more rural counties, who don't care at all. They don't care about lot size. They don't care about road frontage. They don't care about any of the stuff we're gonna go through today. They just say, yeah, it's Wild West, do what you want, right? And so it's all over the board. And so that's why it's so important for you to be able to know in the counties that you're looking in, just a baseline, right? 150, 300, 75, like what's the baseline in this county or this area? And then be able to do some quick measurements. Essential software at this level is going to be either Land ID, Land Portal, some kind of county or city GIS map to be able to measure road frontage. And between all of that, that's going to get you a really good start. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, well, we got to make sure that there's legal access. And so it's really hard to do these types of subdivisions in most counties over an easement. And so we're not necessarily creating easements in a lot of these areas. I'm not really installing private roads. Most of the counties I work in that are a little bit more urban than rural are not going to allow us to do that anyways. And so we've got to make sure that we have legal access to the property. We're not going to be taking, say, long and skinny lots with minimal road frontage. We're going to be looking at wide lots with a lot of road frontage that has legal access from the street and fronts the property. Okay, so that's number two. That one's quick and easy. I don't think I need to go more into that. You just got to make sure that you have legal access and that you front a road. Okay. Number 3, the acreage sizes. And this is where you've got to get into running a little bit of math on what can be supported. You've got to maybe talk with comps, with local realtors. You got to run, your numbers and try to figure out what will the county or the city, the approving authority, what will they allow me to do? Am I seeking for an exempt subdivision? More than likely, 10 acres plus. Am I trying to do, a minor plat? Am I trying to stay under like 7 lots? Am I trying to stay under a certain amount of acres for those lots? Or am I gonna really blow it out of the park and try to install roads and do a major subdivision? All the different factors are going to determine how much work, how much cost, and how much time gets put into this. But you need to be able to determine what does the area look like and what size lots do I need to put in there. And a lot of times you can do that, and this is kind of the next leading in the next section. A lot of times you can do that by looking at the demand. And so whenever we're looking at subdividable areas, especially like with properties that we have never done a subdivide in this county before, in this area before, we're pulling up a map more than likely through like a county GIS or land ID or land portal. And we're looking at the whole county, and then we're zooming in to maybe a mile to 5 mile radius. And we're looking to see what is everybody else in the area doing. Is everybody else have like 100-acre hunting properties or 50-acre hunting properties? Does everybody else have quarter-acre lots, like super major dense developments? Are there 1-acre country home sites? Do we have 5 to 10-acre ranchettes? What do we have out here that we can already see worked? That way we can verify to ourselves that there's actually demand for this product. Because what you're gonna find is that a lot of times, if you go out and you're looking at a 50-acre tract and you're wanting to know, should I do 5 10-acre lots? Should I do 10 5-acre lots? Or should I do 51 acres? Or several hundred quarter acres? What should I do and how do I know which direction to go? Well, you can pretty much look and see what's already near there, and you can say, what else worked? So I know what will work for me, because there's gonna be a lot of times that you're not gonna find comps. You're not gonna be able to find good comparable sales within a reasonable distance. And then you can pretty much know that it's not going to work. For example, we went to a pretty rural county 2.5 hours away from DFW Metroplex to the west, and they don't have any kind of subdivision regulations. And we went out there and, we bought, I think, a 30-acre property, tried to do 5 and 10-acre lots out there. And what we came to realize, even though there were a handful of smaller properties, 10 acres out there, 15-acre lots, we came to realize that most people who wanted to live out there wanted to hunt, they wanted to have land, and ag exemption was incredibly important to them, so we were going to be 10 acres plus to qualify for that no matter what. And ultimately, our subdivide failed. And when I say failed, like we still made money, we just didn't make the double your money kind of profit that we were looking for in most deals. And so that's when I really learned the lesson, and that's what I'm trying to share with you, is that verify visually, is there demand for the product that you're trying to create? And then the next layer is either getting in touch with a local realtor and or, looking at the different methods that you have to run comparables to see what is in demand. And as with any land, we got to make sure that we're running comps that are close to the property, as close to the subject as possible. We don't want to be going 10 miles out to a completely different city, completely different area and running comps there, because one city, as I've learned, one city is not the same as the next city. You could go 5 miles being a completely different area. You could go 1 mile being a completely different area, even in the country. And so we want to have good sold comps. So the next thing to talk about is deed restrictions, because deed restrictions can absolutely limit what you can and cannot do with the property. And so for deed restrictions, the reason that's so important is because you can have everything else be absolutely perfect. You can have the road frontage, the access, the demand, the comps, but then you can look at a property and the deed restrictions that are placed on them when you get them, you can see that they don't allow you to subdivide any further. And you're like, shoot, well now I can't do that. They can limit the amount of homes you can place on a property. For instance, let's say that you want to put 10 lots on a property and you can only have 1 home on it. Well, obviously that's not going to work. The deed restrictions can also limit anything fathomable, from the type of house that you put on it, to how many, to the type of structure, to the density, to everything. And so deed restrictions kill a lot of deals, and you need to be competent in that. And you got to realize that you're probably going to receive those deed restrictions later throughout the process after you're under contract. And so you need to have contingencies in your contract to make sure that you can get out if you don't get deed restrictions you like. But that's something to watch out for. One of the last things to look at is actually easements and the floodplain. And we got to look at easements and floodplain because we need to make sure that there's no big telephone line or electrical line or gas line or something that is going to be in place that is not going to be buildable. Or, you know, for instance, if we're buying 50 acres, maybe 25 of it is filled up with floodplain and the other part's filled up with all these utility lines or gas lines, or even just topography, right? What is part of a mountain? Is it on a slope? Is one part of the property super high, the other part's super low, to where maybe you could only build on part of it. And so that's where you come into the strategy of maybe acquiring part of a property, right? And that's, you know, instead of buying all 50, maybe you only buy the 25 best, make 2 12-acre lots, or maybe you divide it further into 5 5-acre lots, etc. And then you leave the floodplain acreage for somebody, another land investor who's going to buy it for even less. Or you combine a strategy and say, well, for this 25 acres, I'd pay this, for this floodplain, I'd pay this, and that's how you come up with your offer. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of different things to look at, but I hope what I've given you today is a quick overview of how do we look at a property, know if we can do a minor exempt subdivide, and know if it's going to be possible for us to do what we want to do without spending money or a ton of time on it. You know, this due diligence that I just talked about should take like maybe 5 or 10 minutes at most for each property. And so it's a quick blink, it's a quick comps, and looking at a property and seeing whether or not it's going to work, because this is everything it's going to need. So the next video in the series, the third video, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to talk about submittals and plans. So we're going to talk about how do we work with the county approving authority to make sure that we can get our plans approved. Who do we need to talk to? How do we do it? And what are the other considerations that we have to do when we talk about subdividing? So join me there. See you soon.